Hello and welcome to the Wire's discussion today on the Economic Survey 2017-2018. For viewers who are unaware of what the Economic Survey is, it's a flagship document that India's usually the chief economic advisor puts out every year. And it's an assessment of the Indian economy, both in the year that's gone by, that is 2017-2018, and also his outlook for the year ahead. And over the last 3 years, Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Subramanian has sort of really revamped and restructured it. And what a noticeable part of this is in the last few years, he weaves in his own policy prescriptions and tackles some of the more economic debates of the day. And today we'll be with M.K.Venu, our founding editor, to talk about one, his examination of how the year gone by has gone, and also how he looks at the future for India. So Venu, I mean, the first thing he talks about the headline number is 6.75% growth for 2017-2018, and for the upcoming year 7% to 7.5%. So he admits that there were some missteps, there were negative consequences of policy decisions that were taken by the Modi government over the last year, and this has resulted in the lowering of growth. And specifically, he calls it that the Indian economy was temporarily decoupled, decelerating as the rest of the world economy grew up. And this is something we've talked a lot about. Could you tell us?
Yeah, we at The Wire have been writing about this, how in 2017, the rest of the world, 75% of most major economies registered higher GDP growth, registered higher employment growth. In fact, OECD economies are experiencing three-decade low in unemployment. Europe is growing at 3%, America 2.5% plus. Japan is growing strong, China, Brazil, Russia. So India is an outlier in 2017, and in India GDP growth was declining compared to the previous year. Employment growth is also declining. There's some new debate about payroll data. We'll come to that. And exports, Indian exports were doing worse than before. And emerging market peers like Cambodia, Vietnam, they were doing much better in exports. Even Bangladesh, textile exports, etc. So, in some sense, Arvind Subramanian actually admits this fact. And he says temporary decoupling of India's economy from the rest of the world, which was growing in several parameters. So that's interesting that he's admitted that.
Correct, but he does say that we've recovered in the second half of the year. He says.
Yeah, he's saying that there is a recovery. So my sense is that the recovery is not as robust as the growth in other countries. We're just about recovering.
Correct, that's true. And so, I mean, in last year's economic survey, demonetization had almost just happened, and so he was very guarded, very cautious about its effect. And here he presents sort of a more comprehensive analysis. There's no doubt that he says that now the after effects of demonetization have dissipated, and in fact he's done a number of calculations that look at the formalization of the Indian economy. So for instance, demonetization, he said that has brought in 1.8 million new taxpayers to the economy, and GST, again, he admits that there were a lot of initial teething problems and difficulties, but again, now that's resulted in something like a 50% increase in unique indirect taxpayers.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it's a bit early to definitively argue that these new taxpayers are they paying taxes? There's also an argument that they fall below the threshold for tax payment.
Correct. Yes.
So it's possible that through a special campaign they've got a lot of people to register. Even in GST, a lot of we have nearly 1 crore people registering. Correct. Yeah. But actual taxpayers are about 55% of that so far, isn't it? Yeah. Even in GST. So there is these things will stabilize. We'll have to see how much of this will be sustained over the next say year or 2 years. Also, my sense is that this forced formalization may show a larger number of people registering for paying taxes, but forced formalization is hiding one very critical fact, which is massive loss of output in this small and micro industry, which even the GDP advanced estimates don't capture. If you look at the manufacturing growth, which is shown in the latest reported quarter GDP, in that our CSO, our chief statistician T.C. Anand, he slips in a very interesting caveat. He says that of this 20% weightage is to small and micro enterprises, whose number would be in lakhs.
Correct.
And he says that their real numbers, their output numbers haven't come yet. So it'll come from the corporate affairs ministry, where they register with the ROC. So we'll have to see how the small sector has done. And the other thing that Arvind Subramaniam very, very explicitly admits, which the government is trying to fudge, and I'm happy that Subramaniam has spoken the truth. He said farm incomes for the last 4 years have been stagnant. Real incomes have not grown. This we have been writing, we've been on the wire, we have had experts commenting on farm incomes being stagnant. But the government's narrative is that, the Prime Minister is on record that no other government has done more than what his government has for the farmers.
Correct.
So it's not reflecting in farm incomes at all. Farm incomes are stagnant, as the survey says.
In fact, I think he goes on to say that if the government's stated aim of doubling farmer incomes by 20 or 22,
impossible now.
Yeah, I mean I think he uses radical steps are needed to be taken if this is to be achieved.
So the doubling was from 2015-16 to 2022, right?
I think 2020 or 2020.
2021-22. So 2015 to 22, right? Now 3 years have already gone by, and Arvind Subramaniam says, chief economic advisor says, real incomes no growth.
Correct.
So your real income is to be doubled now in the next. You just have 4 years left, right?
Correct, that's true.
4 or 5 years. So you have to get about 20% plus every year.
Correct. But he does.
Impossible,
Right. But he does put some blame. He says that the first 2 years of the Modi government were rain deficient. So he sort of gives them a pass. I don't know to what extent.
Okay, first 2 years I concede rain deficit, drought. Then comes demonetization. Just about when agriculture is recovering, the hammer of demonetization falls, and all the mandis don't have cash. Even now, you look at potato prices, tomato prices. I've been speaking to some agri experts. They're saying that mandis still have cash shortage.
Correct. Yeah.
Farmers are not getting a price. It's a pricing crisis for farmers. They're not getting the price.
Correct. Yeah. In fact, some of the things we've written about. So in the first 2 years of this government, agricultural GVA growth was down because of the drought and whatnot. But rural and agrarian distress was not that bad. But over the last 18 months, we've seen it.
Yeah, it's really worsened, which shows in the agri GDP estimates, right? From 4.9 down to about, it's halved actually.
Correct,
yeah.
Right.
So I think he admits that also.
Yeah. But he doesn't go too into depth on output prices and minimum support guarantee. In fact, he looks at, he devotes a whole chapter to the effect of climate change on
agriculture.
On agriculture in general, which I think is.
I think it's this government. Agriculture is now it's really a bad, messy story.
Correct.
So the more this government truthfully tries to analyze it, they'll only get more bad news.
Correct.
So
that's true. And so another issue that they sort of conveniently step aside is the jobs debate, and that is, along with agrarian distress, is the second economic story of the Modi government. And apart from a few mentions here and there, he does wade into, so recently, for viewers who are not aware, there have been a couple of studies that talk about the quantity of formal jobs that are being created in this country. One was by Ghosh and Ghosh, as we heard, and today we put out a story on that.
Yeah, by Praveen Chakravarti. Yeah.
Correct. And in it, so Arvind Subramanian talks about it. He says that we're not counting. He doesn't talk about whether we're creating enough jobs or not, but he says that we are undercounting the formal employment in this country.
Yeah, I find it very interesting because Subramaniam clearly avoids wading into this big controversy kicked off by Prime Minister Modi, who took the Provident Fund EPFO data and pension fund data, new entrants, directly as a proxy for new employment. Arvind Subramaniam avoids that. He merely says that maybe the formal economy is being underrepresented, but he's not saying that these are new employment being created, because if the formal economy is underrepresented, it would be underrepresented the previous year also. So no comment on rate of change.
Correct.
So in a way, Subramaniam is refusing to endorse the Prime Minister's claim that 7 million new jobs were created in 2017-18, the worst year for India's economy post demonetization and a messy GST.
Correct.
I think he avoids. He doesn't get into that, and I think my view is that the Prime Minister spoke a bit too early, and he's actually fueled a bigger controversy by claiming that that EPFO and NPS, National Pension Fund data by itself represents a huge increase in new employment. I think there are a lot of issues there. There are duplications. One doesn't know whether deduplication has totally been done. And I am also told that the small and micro industries were called by the Prime Minister's office in 2017, given a deadline of 30th June, and told to formalize and bring all their employees onto the EPFO system.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a result of GST.
It's true.
Yeah.
So and Subramaniam rightly concedes that the formal economy was probably being undercounted, but then that is not to say that huge new employment was given, right? So it was undercounting, it was pre-existing.
Correct. And so a very closely linked issue with this, and he devotes a whole chapter to sort of the investment and savings slowdown in India.
He's made a very strong analytical point there.
Correct. I mean, he looks at sort of a historical periods of investment slowdown in the country, and he points rightly, as we've also talked about and written a lot about, that from 2012 and up to 2017 and 18, if we're still assuming that the investment GDP ratio is plummeting, he says this is one of the most, I think,
he says the most severe episodes.
Correct. Yeah.
And Anuj, this is, in fact, I also wrote this a couple of days ago, that investment to GDP ratio has been consistently falling since 2011-12, and at current prices, in 2011-12 it was 34.5%, 34.5% of GDP. In 17-18, as per the GDP estimates, advances, it's 26.5%. There's an 8 percentage point drop at current prices.
At constant, it's 5%.
At constant, it's lower. But nobody can deny the secular fall. And Arvind Subramaniam rightly points out that this is probably the longest and the severest episode. In all earlier episodes, the falling investment got arrested and it picked up.
3 or 4 years.
It bottomed out after 3-4 years. Now just imagine, I have a suspicion that this time too we might have recovered after 4 years, 5 years. But I think the demonetization GST has delayed this, in my view, by another 2 years, 2.5, 3 years.
Right.
So this is the impact of demonetization GST, which this government is refusing to accept and is in denial. But the economic survey, in subtle ways, concedes this point actually.
But he is also hopeful that the insolvency process, that the process of cleaning up NPS.
Balance sheet problem.
Correct. He's optimistic in that sense, that he believes that it's working, and I think we have every reason to believe that in certain accounts cleanup has started going through. There have been roadblocks, a few things to
actually,
work out
Anuj, my sense is that I'll go back to what Finance Minister Arun Jaitley said some time ago, that the entire problem resides in 40 large Indian groups who have political links, and they are the ones whom Arvind Subramaniam in his report very subtly refers to as stigmatized capitalism as opposed to crony capitalism.
Crony socialism.
He says that we have moved from crony socialism to stigmatized capitalism. By saying stigmatized capitalism, I think he's being a bit soft on these 40 groups. They have the last word is still to be heard on the 10 lakh crore rupees that loans that they've taken and they've not been able to repay. Many of them, some have, but some have sold their companies to repay. This process, Anuj, will also take. The insolvency courts are there. The systems have been set up.
Correct.
For this capital to actually move, to become mobile and not get stuck in these companies which are not able to make anything out of it or not use it. So let's see how long it takes for this capital to move to newer projects.
Correct.
So, like in some cases, like RCom has been picked up by Mukesh Ambani. So that moves, right? So some of these assets are moving, but many assets are still stuck.
Correct.
And there are many other issues which are which the administration is still dealing with.
Correct.
Yeah, like if assets are to be auctioned, whether the company, the same guy can participate in the auction or not, you know, in the guise of through other companies, can they participate, the same promoters. So these are all very tricky legal issues still being sort of gone into.
Correct.
So let us see how this twin balance sheet issue gets resolved.
It's a little funny because he sort of puts a lot of faith in the NPA process and that the IBC process will work. But at the same time, when he looks at tax administration and sort of the tax department's efforts at litigation, and he points out that I think over the last 10 years, right now, corporate litigation, the amount of money they spend on feuding with tax disputes and all, it's hit something like 20,000, 30,000 crores.
Yeah.
And the tax department is not doing a good job at petitioning. And
it's the biggest litigant actually.
Yeah.
The government is the biggest litigant. Yeah.
Correct. And he says he says the courts need to move faster. They need to.
Yeah. The courts need to move faster. The tax department needs to not to sort of appeal where they know that they have a bad case, but they end up appealing because they are scared of CAG tomorrow inquiry by Vigilance Commission CAG. So those are all systemic issues. Yeah.
Correct. That's true. And finally, Venu, so I mean, I'm a little surprised because in the run up to this thing, everyone, even economics, I think there were a couple of news reports last week talking about its emphasis on social sector, on rural development, and here there are one or two chapters which deal with it, but very muted. In fact, he says openly at one point there's simply not enough fiscal space to increase expenditure on critical social infrastructure, and he notes that it's largely stayed within 6%. 6% of GDP is being spent on social sectors.
Actually, he's clearly hinting that we are underspending on education and health.
Yep.
There is no denying, the world acknowledges, Indian policymakers acknowledge. So there is a need to increase spend on health and education, but they are saying that they don't have any fiscal space. And this fiscal space that this government had 3 years ago is far more than it is today.
That's very true.
And this was commented on by one of the bankers, Uday Kotak. He's the CEO of Kotak Mahindra Bank. Yeah. He made an interesting remark recently. He said, our macros were far better 3 years ago than they are today.
Correct.
Because oil prices have hit $70, and if they stay like this, which some of the global analysts are saying, Goldman Sachs, etc., then the fiscal space will get more and more limited. And GST is yet to stabilize, and there will be a shortfall of about 90,000, I'm told 1 lakh crore on GST this fiscal. Now, I don't know whether next year what will happen with GST. So, which is reflected in the way the corporate bond rates, the yields have suddenly expanded by nearly 100 basis points. This is not good news.
Yeah.
When corporate bond yields expand, they are signaling that things are not well with the fisc. Right. And they also signal that you can't bring down interest rates. And that comes to the second point where Subramaniam says that one of the reasons why recovery has not happened is because real interest rates are still high.
Correct.
And they are still high because of all these structural problems. No?
That's true. Yeah. So just wrapping up a discussion, based on this economic survey, what do we expect later this week during the budget? Because last year the economic survey had so many things. There was the talk on universal basic income, there was a talk on asset bank, nothing which really panned out in terms of policy decisions or the budget. So, but on Thursday,
my sense, Anuj, the budget on 1st Feb will be for the first time. There won't be indirect taxes at all, because all those things are now being handled by GST Council, right? So there will be there's just income tax, corporate tax, and my sense is that budget will be basically a big statement on the government's outlook policy for the next fiscal and thereafter. We have an election year, so it will be there'll be a lot of focus on agriculture, social sector, basically signaling to all these constituencies who constitute a chunk of voters that these are the promises that we are trying to keep. They've not been able to keep so far. So it will be a statement on how this government would try to sort of meet as far as possible many of those promises.
Correct. But they have to keep the fiscal deficit target in mind.
I know, but I have a feeling that they will have to pause and let go on the fiscal deficit by at least 0.5 percentage, 0.5 percentage for the time being. The global credit rating agencies won't like it. So political economy wise, we have a situation where the global finance capital and our people sitting in Bombay, the stock market, who have players who have great influence on the government. They would want a very tight fisc, and they would want the government to go slow on this social sector spending. But then Mr. Modi will have to look at the voters in 2019, right? So he'll have to do this very delicate balancing act. I don't know who will win. So far, finance capital is winning, it seems.
Okay. So thanks. I think will bring our discussion to an end, and we'll know by the end of this week how the budget pans out. And please do keep an eye out for analysis reportage. Yeah.